Good morning, Wildcats. Congratulations to the class of 2024. What a ride you've been on. What a crazy time to be a college student. I want to say thank you to Dean Dillon and to Koya for inviting me here today. I was surprised and honored to be asked. Of course, when I agreed, I was imagining a small pop-up tent on the football field with maybe 50 people that might show up. That's the way college graduation looked in the mid-90s. I was not imagining all of this. I've been thinking about what I could say that might be interesting enough to hold your attention. Should I tell a funny story about an escapade in the dining hall? Should I drone on and on about a momentous day in your life and how these are the best days of your life? Should I think of some motto to share that's carried me through the last 30 years since I last sat in a UNH classroom? None of that seemed right. Storytelling seems the only way to share what I know to be true. The truth is, I didn't want to come to UNH. I had my heart set on a fancier school in Massachusetts, and let's just say the opportunity to fulfill that vision did not arrive. My mother, on the other hand, was convinced UNH was the school for me, and like in many things, she was right. I started as an English and journalism major, adding women's studies in my second year. I was on the swim team, I wrote for the New Hampshire and Main Street, and I spent many hours in Hamilton Smith, which wasn't nearly as nice as it is now. I'm not really sure I thought about getting a liberal arts education. What I thought about was getting out of my small town in Western New York, away from my high school class of 73 kids that I had known since preschool. I thought about being near the ocean and about going to a school so big that no one would know my name. Liberal arts was just a fancy term for saying all of that. The first months were hard. I was desperately homesick. I was convinced every single person I met grew up in Nashua. But by January, I had met my people who remain my lifelong friends, one of whom is right over there today. In the spring of my sophomore year, I took a class with Professor Lester Fisher. I know people say things like that class changed my life, but in this case, it truly did. It was a class on jazz and Black literature. The class was held in a lecture hall with rows and rows of seats, and Professor Fisher lectured from the front. In a word, he was intimidating. He would lock the door at the exact moment class was supposed to start, and he did not let latecomers in. He had a commanding presence, and he would call on you whether you had your hand up or not. If he didn't think your answer was in depth enough, he'd say, "How do you know that? Who says?" He had no patience for phoning it in. You were there to learn and to work and to participate. I loved and feared this class in equal measure. Soon I was devouring African American literature and would have minored in it if I could. I was listening to all the music I could get my hands on: Billie Holiday, Etta James, Sarah Vaughan. It was in that class that I first heard Miles Davis, Thelonious Monk. I read James Baldwin and Toni Morrison. It's also where I began to build a foundation for my thinking about big concepts like inequality and injustice. I found myself in this class week after week with mostly faces that looked like me. And there was Professor Fisher, one of the only faculty members of color at UNH. He was the kind of professor that made you think. He didn't want you to memorize. He wanted you to wrestle and struggle and get uncomfortable. What he was teaching was opening a whole new world to me and a whole new world inside myself. I found myself asking questions like, what was my role in writing the injustices of the past and the present? What else didn't I know about other people's worlds? Why hadn't I learned about James Baldwin or Billie Holiday before? Professor Fisher's class was asking, no, demanding, that I look in the mirror and decide, who did I really want to be? How did I want to spend my life? How big could I make my worldview? I started paying more attention to concepts like advocacy and activism. I joined my first and my second protest, and advocated for more equality on campus, the words of Baldwin and Holiday echoing in my ears. It's taken years to figure out what to do with the doors Professor Fisher and UNH opened in me. Looking back, all the steps I took, all the things I've done, they look like a straight path filled out tidy little bullets on a resume, where one day you wake up and someone asks you to give a speech at your alma mater. But the truth is, everything I learned at UNH is woven into the winding path I ventured on when I graduated. Professor Fisher taught me that I had no right to be comfortable, that if I wanted to feel comfortable, a dull road lay ahead. If I wanted to do something, I had to ask tough questions, and I had to put myself in the way of hard things. I had to ask over and over, how do you know? What do you know? Who says? And the best question of all, why not? I don't know how many times someone asked me, what's your major? When I responded English, they'd say, what are you gonna do with that? And I'm sure some of you are familiar with that response. It gets annoying. It would have been so much easier to say, my major is science, or engineering, or business. I didn't exactly know what I was going to do with my English degree. What I've learned in the years since graduation is that almost no one graduates and just does one thing forever, especially liberal arts majors. That's what makes us amazing. We often don't grow up to be fill-in-the-blank people. We do many things, and we contain multitudes, like the famous poet once said. Recently, I learned about the concept of something called a career portfolio strategy. I realized the concept would have been useful when all those well-meaning adults were asking me what I was going to do with my life, with my entire life. A portfolio strategy means that you will build a career and a life around the things that matter to you. You will have full-time jobs and part-time jobs, volunteer, and find ways to participate in all kinds of ways. Your career and your life will contain endless possibilities, things you spend years on and then never do again, things you do every day and for brief moments in time. And slowly, themes will emerge. Like liberal arts, your career strategy will look different from the person sitting next to you. You will follow the themes of the things that matter to you, and those themes will lead you to answers and even more questions. You may find yourself doing something completely different 30 years from now than you ever dreamed of today, and that's the point. I never did become a journalist. I fell in love. I turned down a New York City internship in a magazine, and I followed my heart and my now husband to Baltimore. I worked for nonprofits and underserved communities, and I found ways to fight for equality. At every turn, I was forced to reckon with, what did I know? What was there to learn? I had to look for teachers like Professor Fisher, often finding them in unlikely places, like working at a nonprofit with middle school girls from inner city DC. When people told me I couldn't build a business that was focused on changing the world, and I ended up building a firm focused on placing diverse leaders across the social impact sector, there was a voice calling me from the back of the room, whispering to me, what else? How can you help? How do you know? And challenging me to push myself beyond my comfort zone. There have been many days in my career when I have had that same feeling I had sometimes in Professor Fisher's class, where I wanted to slink down in my chair and hope no one called on me, where I wondered why I was in the room at all. But there have been just as many days when I've used what Professor Fisher taught me, what a UNH liberal arts education gave me, to change the world. This is what liberal arts means to me. It gives each of us the broadest view of the way the world intersects, overlaps, diverges, and evolves. UNH taught me this. Just do something. Ask yourself again and again, what do you know? What don't you know? And what needs to change? So the next time someone asks you what you're going to do with your degree, you can answer with something like, I'm deploying a portfolio strategy to my career. And watch as they look at you confused. Or you can think to yourself, I'm going to do all of it, because why not? You can find diversity and push your thinking wherever you are. You might not find yourself in places where your thinking is challenged, and our social media feeds won't do it for us. Classes won't be available to stretch your thinking. Life will be routine sometimes. Don't let it be. Hold in your memory the class that cracked you open, the experiences you had at UNH that showed you the world was bigger than you imagined, the way this place and these people showed you that you had a voice and you should use it. Seek ways to feel that UNH feeling wherever you are. Let yourself be uncomfortable, push the boundaries, ask yourself, why not? What else can I do? What don't I know? And most importantly, how can I help? On my graduation day, Marian Wright Edelman, renowned child and civil rights advocate, was my commencement speaker. I don't remember much of what she said. The day was hot. I was excited. And let's be honest, half the crowd spent more time celebrating than focusing on her words. But I do remember this. She said, education is for improving the lives of others and for leaving your community and the world better than you found it. If you don't like the way the world is, you change it. You have an obligation to change it. You just do it one step at a time. Congratulations to all of you. May you keep asking yourself the hard questions, exploring, and watching your own life take shape.